to Japan and some products sold there. And I actually they told me I should bring it to them, and I went to Japan. Okay.
I will come back and just set this up, and then I'll leave.
For those who are just arriving, if you remember, you have a chance to enter for a draw to win an Echo, an Amazon Echo. So all you have to do to enter the draw is to go to the URL at the top. You see the one awsugn.typeform, that one there, and fill in the form, and then
Try this one here. So try that. Yeah, try that up there. That URL. See if that works better.
working all right?
Yes. Working better.
Okay. Before we start, just to kind of getting to know everybody here, how many of you here are developers? Okay, getting a sense of how many of you here are involved in UX? Okay, how many of you here are familiar with voice? How many of you are developing voice apps or anything with voice technology? Great. Okay. Give them a hard time. How many of you are familiar with design thinking? So, does that help you understand the profile? Okay. Are there any particular special things you might want to ask Joe about related to voice? Okay, we'll wait till the Q&As afterwards. How many of you are members of the meetup group? The Design Thinking Meetup? Everybody? Okay, I'll ask the other way. Who isn't a member of the meetup group? All right. So if you get a chance to go to Dublin Design Thinking and join us. How many of you have booked for the other forthcoming talks, the one on impact mapping? And how many of you have booked for the talk on persuasive design? Okay. So you might have noticed some of the design techniques if you were on that thing that we were using to persuade you to come here. It's worked. We've got half of you here. So we'll just give it a few more minutes and then we'll entertain and rock you. All right, you got a sense of your audience? All right. Oh, one other question. How many of you have either used Cortana or Siri or Google Voice or any of those things? What do you guys think of it? Speak up, sorry?
It's okay, some small things.
All
Let's
right.
settle on.
Okay. Have any of you got ideas for voice apps? Okay. Have any of you got any idea about how easy or difficult it is to build voice things? Do you think it's easy or difficult? Okay, well, what you're going to discover is one of the precursor languages was a thing called VXML. Have any of you heard of VXML? Okay. And it's kind of now been superseded by what you call the, I forgot the thing,
No, STML, it's a different.
No, but there's a speech dialect thing. Anyway.
STML.
Yeah.
STML.
Yes. So if you're familiar with kind of XML or HTML kind of thing, then writing the scripts to it isn't that difficult. Would you agree with that? Ish.
VXML or?
For
No, it's different. That's programming.
Oh.
VXML is like web pages.
Okay. Well, no, it's just scripting it is what I'm saying. So we'll give it another 2 minutes and then we'll get the show kicked off.
Let's get rid of some false positives here.
Shall we kick off the video and just start that because then it can be start by 6:20.
Sure. That's, I got a little greasy. I shouldn't have eaten. See, it's just not being responsive. Why don't you let me do it? Okay.
Right on full screen. Just play it and
Yeah, full screen. See, it keeps thinking I'm right clicking.
it's not catches it.
See, this middle bit here is gone weird.
The new Amazon Echo has everyone asking Alexa for help.
Alexa, what time is it? What the hell is wrong with this blasted thing?
But the latest technology isn't always easy to use for people of a certain age.
These kids done bought me a busted machine again. Oh, yes.
That's why Amazon partnered with AARP to present the new Amazon Echo Silver, the only smart speaker device designed specifically to be used by the greatest generation. It's super loud and responds to any name even remotely close to Alexa, so they can find out the weather.
Allegra, what is the weather outside?
It is 74 degrees and sunny.
Huh?
It is 74 degrees and sunny.
Where?
Outside.
What about it?
The temperature outside is 74 degrees and sunny.
I don't know about that.
The latest in sports.
Clarissa, how many of those Satchel strike out last night?
Satchel Paige died in 1982.
How many you get?
Satchel Paige is dead.
In what now?
Died.
Who did?
Satchel Paige.
I don't know about that.
Even local news and pop culture.
Anita, what them boys up to across the street?
They are just playing.
They what now?
They are just playing.
You say they just playing now?
Yes, they are just playing.
I don't know about that.
To smart devices like your thermostat.
Alessandra, turn the heat up.
The room is already 100 degrees.
Are you trying to kill me, Alessandra?
The new Amazon Echo Silver plays all the music they loved when they were young.
Angela played black jazz.
Playing, jazz.
It also has a quick scan feature to help them find things.
Emilia, where did I put the phone?
The phone is in your right hand.
And it has an feature for long rambling stories.
So then I gave him $5, and he said I only gave him $1. I said, I know I gave you a 5. Because I only had a 5 and a 1 on me. And this is $1 right here. So, I mean, you tell me who's crazy.
Amazon Echo Silver. Get yours today. I said get yours today.
To order Amazon Echo Silver, send a check or money order to Amazon.com right now.
So we're hoping that whoever wins the Alexa doesn't have an experience like that. And I was asked to tell if anybody was past the age of 50, this was not aimed at them or personal in any way. All right? You go ahead and start. Okay. All right. So first of all, a quick thank you to our sponsor for the raffle, which is the. How many of you are members of the AWS Meetup group? Okay. Well, they were kind enough. Ronan was kind enough to sort that out. And then I'd like to thank Justin for helping organize the venue, and Julitza and John, because without their help, we wouldn't be able to run the event. And then, of course, without Stacy, Joe's better half, and Joe, we wouldn't have a talk. So without much further ado, let me introduce you to Joe.
Sorry, just marshaling my electronic devices. Can you hear? Is this better? Should I talk there? Should I talk here? Is this okay? People in the back, is this fine? We're good? All right, I'll just scream. I might get a little hoarse. I was rehearsing earlier today and decided that I need to stop because I was losing my voice. But we should be good. So, welcome. Thank you for coming. I'm amazed and delighted at the number of people who've turned up. I think this is great. I'm also delighted at the number of people who put their hands up for having a UX background. Okay, because UX is kind of like everything. Okay, especially when it comes to this, and that's kind of where I'm going with most of this talk here. I mean, we'll talk a little bit about technical stuff, but this is mainly how to design for these things, because it's a very different sort of environment. So hopefully I'll give you some idea around that, some clues of what the problems are, and what we might be able to do about them. So let me start off about me. I'm not particularly anyone special, but just give you some background so you know where I'm coming from, et cetera, like that. Despite my accent, I'm actually not from Dublin, but I spent a good amount of time in Dublin. I actually went to Trinity here, did my degree there, stayed here long enough to become a citizen, joined a small company called Lotus out in the Airways Industrial Estate, which happened to be headquartered in Boston. At one point, they got bought by IBM, and I moved off to Boston with them there, and I kind of stuck there for coming up on my 25th year in IBM. So that's kind of like my personal history of where I was when I've been here. So I'm very happy to be back in Dublin. Been taking my family, who's up in the back row. If you hear any commotion, it's the peanut gallery. My daughters just, throw Paw Patrol at them and they'll be good. But in that, taking them, seeing the places I've been rambling on about for, the 20 years it's been since I walked these streets. Technical-wise, in IBM, they're big into patents. I have 6 patents for various things. Some of them are with regards to machine translation, which is not today's topic, but it has a number of interesting similarities with speech to text, okay, which has informed some of my sort of both technical and design thinking around that sort of thing. So that's kind of relevant. Just a week before I left, I was actually, while I was on vacation here, I was informed that I also was given an Outstanding Technical Achievement Award, which is a thing in IBM which no one else has probably heard of, for the incredibly interesting field of firewall automation, which is kind of where my day job comes from, and has absolutely nothing to do with this tonight, and I will not bore you with the details of it. But I do want to say I do work for IBM. The stuff I do around voice design is not for IBM. This is what I do for my wife and her company in off hours. And IBM is very open about you doing that sort of thing. I just have to, say here in front of all that anything I might say does not reflect IBM's opinion, et cetera, et cetera. I speak for myself. Don't assume IBM is doing anything based on what I say. After I make that little speech, I can say anything I want, and I keep my job. Let's see, what else did I have here? Okay, so moving away from the day job into sort of the voice design sort of stuff. My wife and myself, we've written 2 books or ebooks that are up for sale on Amazon. You can find them there. No, this is not a sales pitch. I'm just kind of giving you a reference because they are kind of the only 2 books available on Amazon that really focus on developing stuff. Actually, no, there's a third one now. Quentin has done it. So, okay, it's not just the 2 of us. There is a third one on designing and developing for it. And I do want to emphasize our first book that came out, How to Program Amazon Echo, is the full title is, Programming Amazon Echo, Design, Development, Testing, and Monetizing Alexa Skills. And it is pretty much divided into 4 with those 4 sections. I didn't want to write something that just, here's how to program, because a lot of other people can do that. Anybody can do that. It's not rocket science programming work. And a lot of people go to this because they want to learn how to program, and this is kind of a fun device to program, et cetera, like that. Amazon have a lot of good doc out there on how to develop for it, so that's mostly covered. But there's almost nothing on design. Okay, Amazon recently came out with some stuff, and they clearly read our book before they published it, on designing audio apps. Okay, so, imitation is the most sincere form of flattery. I'll take that for what it's worth, which is great. But, again, we talk about that in our book. We made a good chunk of it there because it's a unique environment. And we'll talk through a lot of that tonight. Testing is another area. A lot of the work I've done in my day job has been around testing, automated testing tools, supporting QA on developing stuff, and something many people overlook and don't give enough respect for. So I definitely want to make that a big section. And then there's the whole return on investment. That's a big question mark over a lot of this sort of development. But I could give a whole talk on that. It's not what we're talking about tonight. But that's the first book. The second book focuses a bit more on games. Speaking of monetization, Amazon decided to start passing out some money for the top engaged games. That created an interest out there, so we did another book kind of focused in on that. It's not divided the same way the first one is. It does have a more broader approach. It can be used more broadly because, developing a game is not that much different from developing some other sort of engaging thing like that. But it goes through a different number of types and looks at it, and there's a lot of stuff in there about how to develop an audio app from the design point onwards like that. So, again, first one is like €1. It's not going to break the bank. The second one is, we put the price up, it's like €3. So you might want to budget for that. But, again, it's up to you. But beyond that, we have actually done a bunch of skills as well on it. Amazon, they call their application skills. Okay, so we have 15 or so skills on Alexa and Google Home that are out there. So we have actual practical experience. Some of these are extremely popular. Some of them are not. And that's always good lessons there about what makes something good and what makes something not so good. To the point, just to give you a sort of number, 6 swords is kind of our currently leading skill. We have had one user who spent, for a period of time, 6 hours a day with that skill. Okay, it's a game, and I didn't think it was that interesting, but he obviously thought it was interesting enough. And we had the other number we have around that is we had 50 users between Alexa and Google Home who played it for more than 20 minutes a day. Okay, that's a huge engagement. I mean, if you've worked in this field, if you've seen the other skills out there, they're usually short things like this. That's a huge sort of thing like that. So we've done stuff that has been resonated. Okay, and that's kind of the background experience we're coming from. We're going to show you a couple of these. Give you an idea of how they work, but you can see that we're not just talking in theory here. We do have some stuff in practice of what we've done. last bit here. Okay, so more shameless self-promotion, then we'll stop and get to content, I promise you. And we're going to send this presentation around. If you filled in your email address, we'll send it to you so you can come. Don't worry about, oh my God, what is that up there, et cetera, et cetera. This case study done on a blog with one of our skills. We've had different press coverages in different ways, but from design point of view, this is a good article because it focuses very specifically on the voice user experience and some of the things that we did in Six Swords in particular that were groundbreaking. And I'm going to talk to a bunch of those things as we go through it there, but for a more detailed analysis or a different point of view than me, check that article out. It's a good one to look at. We'll have a resources slide at the end with some more links to it. But another place I kind of hang out and do stuff on is the Slack channel. There's a Slack channel set up for Amazon Alexa stuff. There's generally people in it 24/7. If you have quick questions, it's a great place to go. There's an Amazon forum. I used to post a lot on there, not so much of late. Amazon has kind of come up to speed, and initially they didn't answer questions very quickly there, so I would come up and answer them. But now they're much more up to speed there like that. But that is where you would get sort of official answers from Amazon and stuff like that. And those are good resources. Okay, so let's move on into the actual content. So this is kind of a general sort of agenda. What I'm going to go through, I'm going to talk a little bit about the history. You do seem fairly familiar with the space. I'm just going to then try to put sort of edges around that for those who are a little less familiar, and for those who are familiar to kind of give you what I see as the demarcation points along the development of these voice applications. Where the market is today, so where, some of the stats around that, and, how it's building, what the people out there who are actually doing the surveys about this have to say about that. Then we're going to go into the devices themselves. We're going to talk first of all about some of their limitations. Okay, the way these are designed, they can do certain things and they can't do certain other things. So the first step is to understand the terrain of what we have. Okay, there's certain things you just can't get past. Okay, that this is how it's built. It's probably not going to change. We have to design around that. Okay, and to that end, we'll then move on to looking at, okay, given that, what are the tips and techniques that we can use to counter the fact that it has these limitations? We're going to look at, then move on to sort of, well, what can one do with this, or what are good ideas to do? We had a couple people who had ideas of voice apps. I'd love all of you to come out of here with all sorts of ideas for voice apps. But, part of that is saying what's just not going to work. What is not a good sort of thing. And then also what is a good sort of thing. Then we'll finish up talking about where I, as a personal opinion, see this field going. What sort of new features I think are going to be out there, and what sort of potential is there. And then lastly, give you some resources to move up for further information and stuff like that. So, when we look at voice apps, when we think about it, we've actually been using voice apps for quite some time. Teleprompt systems, okay? When you ring up somebody or something like that and you don't get a person, you get an automated voice response system, okay? That's an audio app. And one of the advantages of that is it uses a telephone. Everybody has a telephone, okay? Everybody knows how to use a telephone. You ring it, you get there, and somebody talks to you, and you can talk back. Or more often, you are instructed to pick one of several options by pushing a button. And that's where we start hitting immediately the limitations of this as an application development thing. That's Manoj mentioned there, voice XML was invented for this specifically. But typically, the way they've been doing it is they give you a couple things. With touch-tone phones, you can then press a button to say what your something is. And your options are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, sometimes star, occasionally hash. We've got like 12 options to choose from. The biggest advance that we had, and we've had these for quite some time, the biggest advance I've seen in that is where they have press or say 1. You can now say 1 instead of pressing. There's some other stuff they've done as well, which I'll come to those as when comparing them with sort of voice apps that are like that. But let's look at it from a design point of view. What were the design goals? Okay, the press, the colorful sort of what is this for? It's it has it down as a convenient and immediate way to get self-service. You can ring up somebody, and if it's after hours, something like that, you get someone. They give you a couple options. You can pick a choice. You get an answer to your question. You're a happy customer, and off you go. That's kind of one side of the story, and that's the very positive side of it. Okay, if you want to look at the sort of, well, not sort of negative side, but the business side or whatever, is they're cheap. They're certainly cheaper than paying somebody to be on the phone 24/7, et cetera, like that. You can service any number of people, and so forth. And that's probably the primary motivation. It does provide some benefit, but more likely is that it relieves the expenses of doing it some other way. Because, to be honest, nobody likes these. I mean, does anybody like dialing an auto prompt system? Okay, does anybody prefer that? Okay, do we have like any millennials in the audience who don't like talking to people? I'm not a millennial, but there's many days where I don't want to deal with people. And, those days I might be happy. But in general, it is not a superior solution to somebody being on the phone. Okay, but companies do this because they have other advantages and they do things like that. And that's something that's important to remember, that, we don't really like using these, but we do use these, and they're there, okay? But can we design them better? Okay. So let's move forward a bit. Moving on to speech recognition. Apple has this, Windows has this. Windows has had this since Windows 98. Okay, some people here might not even remember Windows 98. Okay, but I remember it came out, and it had, I think it was called Windows Commander or something like this. But it was there, and you could use it. It's just no one did. Okay, and when you get down to it and look at it, it's like, okay, why didn't people use this? Well, in the early days of voice recognition, and IBM had some products, and I played in that space when I was doing machine translation. You had to train them. You had to sit down. I remember reading Mark Twain to, I think it was Via Voice that IBM had. You sit there reading off Mark Twain to it, and says, okay, I think I understand how you speak. And the accuracy did go up a ton. Okay, but it wasn't good at broad understandings. And you had to do this with your machines, and that was fine. And you could increase the quality to something that was workable. However, the biggest constraint over the quality of what it could understand was the microphone. Okay, PCs have a little jack, like the one I got plugged into my one here, that broadcasts anything up there. Same jack, hasn't changed until Apple decided to remodel things 2 years ago. It's been the same for, I don't know, decades. You plug your microphone into that, you got it. But you can have your cheap, like $10 microphone, €10 microphone, whatever that you picked up in the store that came with something. I remember they come these things that got to be really cheap and in terrible quality. Okay, and that would dramatically reduce things. You needed a good quality microphone. I write novels as well, and I turned one of them into an audio book. And the advice at the time was go out and buy a $250 microphone. Okay, if you want a good quality recording stuff. And since I expected to make, I don't know, like $10 on my book, which I think I've met my target, maybe not. Fiction doesn't sell very well. That was like way out of the question, so I used my Rock Band microphone. It's kind of okay. But the take-home point is that everybody had a different quality. It came in there, and it was really hard to guarantee any sort of responsiveness. You didn't know how good it was going to be at understanding. And if you don't know that, it's hard to write something that's going to work for most people. Okay. Consequently, they weren't really that useful. Nobody bought into it. There was no apps written for it, and most people don't even know that your machine could do it. Okay, so that's kind of where that went and why that didn't really take off. What kind of changed things a lot was Siri. Siri came along. You've all heard about it. You've probably all seen it. You've probably seen funny jokes about it, which we'll get to in a minute. But one of the important things about it, it was on a device. It was on an Apple device. You have Apple, you have Android, different philosophies. One wants to own the stack from bottom to the top. The other one wants to make it so anybody can use it. Now, the advantage with Apple there is they own the stack. They know exactly what hardware they have. Now, phones aren't built with a great quality microphone, which is kind of amusing because what they're allegedly are for is for talking to people. But people care more about the pixelation of the camera than they do about the quality of their audio and also has to go over lines and stuff like that. But it was consistent. Okay, they knew exactly what hardware was in it. They could test it and work out the limitations. Okay, they could work out just how good the software had to be with that quality of microphone to give a user experience that was beneficial. Okay, and that was the big thing that made a difference. The other thing was the fact that everybody has a smartphone sitting in their pocket. Okay, I won't even ask people to put their hands up because I'm sure, it's burning a hole in everybody's pocket right now. Mine's sitting right down there. That made it ubiquitous. Okay, it was there. Everybody had it. it had a consistent quality, you could start developing apps for it. So on the technical side, it was a big success. However, you had some points where it wasn't necessarily a design success. Okay, and again, there's a lot of amusing things out there. I'm sure you've all seen this. There's been many memes about autocorrect and stuff like that. Mostly these sort of misunderstandings were distracting mishaps. Okay. The only really cogent one here is, and they're funny, and that kind of distracts from the utility of it. The important one is the one in the middle, where I have a gambling addiction, and it's like, oh look, here are the nearby casinos. Okay, which is really the opposite of what you want to happen. Okay, and you know, in other examples could actually be completely detrimental. Okay, and that is an important thing, the unintended consequences. Okay, if you're going to push this out there, there's that sort of thing like that. So design-wise, you know, it had problems like that. But kind of what it comes down to it is Apple is, again, they own the stack. They're very design conscious. But what they're conscious about is their design and what they want users to experience. Okay, I have terrible trouble with Apple devices. I just think differently. But I don't think different like Apple thinks different. And they frustrate the crap out of me because I can't make it do what I want to do. If I do things their way, it works flawlessly. I have many friends who are extraordinarily happy with their Apple devices. I mean, I have one of each because that's what I do at work. But, you know, it's not my sort of thing. But Apple and they produce a consistent design style. Okay, they're noted for that, and that has been very successful for them. Okay, but that's not what everybody wants. One key point of Siri is it does not allow third parties to participate. Okay? You can't develop an app for Siri. Only Apple can develop and add functionality to it. So its growth is limited by what Apple wants to do, and its design and its approach is limited by what Apple wants users to experience. Okay? You can't get other weird stuff. Like one of the early days in Alexa, one of the most successful skills just made flatulent noises. Okay, you're never going to see that on Siri. It's just not what Apple would do. But some guy did it for Alexa. It was, to the consternation of the Alexa execs, was really popular. But anyways, it's their design. It's what they want. Okay, so that was kind of a limitation. So where we go to is where we are today. What came from that? Now we have these voice assistants. Okay? And they're sort of, in many ways, a direct evolution of that, but they have a number of characteristics that identify them in their own space. I'll go through them in a minute there. But what is common to all of them are things like this. First of all, they're specialized hardware. Okay? This is a piece of the Amazon Echo came out first. It's this big cylinder. It's its own thing. Okay? The other successor ones they had get smaller and cheaper, but they're pieces of hardware. Okay? The important thing there is, as I going back to the other stuff, is that's got a really expensive microphone. Okay? You're selling somebody a phone, they don't want to pay a lot of money to have a really good microphone so that it can do, you know, the speech stuff it wants to do. Okay? But if you're selling them an audio system, you control the end price. They have the end price on it. But they can decide how they distribute that amongst what components they put into it. Maybe it's got a cheap Wi-Fi in it. It doesn't have it's only got a small amount of memory. I can't remember. I thought 9 megs seems a bit small, but maybe it's that size or whatever. It doesn't have a lot of memory in it. Okay, it doesn't need it for this particular thing, but it has a really good microphone in it. And the reason is because that can then drive the quality. So that's why you see these things as specialized pieces of hardware. Okay, that's one commonality. Another commonality is they're designed to be used in a domestic setting. Okay, they're for somebody sitting at home. You're at home, and your device is there. Your home is there. Your Echo is there. You know, they're not something that's really meant to be used in the workplace. A lot of people are trying for that, and I'd really love to see an enterprise version, but that's not where the companies are going. Okay, it's not something you necessarily see in a public place. And people have tried things like that. There's been a few kiosks, but really, where all the marketing is, where the price point is, and everything they're aiming at is a domestic setting. And part of that was coming to when they first came to this, what they were looking at was home automation. Okay, they wanted you to be able to use this to control the Internet of Things, you know, as is in your house. You know, if your lights come on and off like that. And I've never been a big fan of home automation. This is kind of colored many years ago. I was still in Dublin, and I was visiting my boss's boss in Boston, and he was into home automation. And he said, oh, yeah, come see this. And he sort of, we're at his house in Charleston, Massachusetts, and he said, look at this. And he got up and walked over, booted up his PC, loaded up a program, went through a bunch of menus, hit a button, and the curtains opened. Okay, and I'm like, wow, that was really impressive. I'm thinking, just got up and opened the curtains, So I've never been big about that. But what really clicked when I first heard about Alexa in this context is that, okay, you don't have any of that crap, okay? You don't have to go through and drill down through all these menus. Because I was like, okay, Internet of Things, that's great. What happens when you have 40 devices in your house? How do you control them? And this was their answer. They thought, okay, because you can say and talk to any one of those things and activate it. I'm like, wow. So that was where it started off, okay? It's not quite where they ended up, because when it comes down to it, the number of people who are willing to spend 40 euros on a light that you can like turn on and off is fairly limited, okay? To be in a certain income bracket and, not have kids who will turn it on and off all the time. Or, it's a certain demographic. It's not that broad. But people were using these other things. A large part of it was used for home entertainment, for playing music. Okay, we all, we started off with the iPods, then moved to iPhones, which we still kind of used as iPods. Now we have a voice-activated speaker that we still kind of use like an iPod. People play their music on it. It's kind of the most used feature on it. People also, kind of a mix between the two, use it for controlling their home entertainment systems. So they'd say, okay, play Horse Lips on my living room stereo, or something like that. I actually got it to recognize Jared Doom earlier. Never thought it would recognize that. It's like, boom, played it right away. And the other thing is I think they maybe have learned their lesson from Apple and decided to make them open to third parties. Either that, or they really want to catch up with Apple and they need all the feature additions they can. But these tend to be open for third-party development, okay, which means people like you and me, us, can write additional features for them, okay? This means that they can morph into whatever it is that people want, okay? We come up with the idea, we put it out there, and if it's something that resonates, people will use it for that, okay? And it will be a new feature that's there that's beyond where they thought about things, okay? So that's one thing that all the new things have had in common, and that's why I see this as kind of the next generation and where we are now. So let's have a quick demo. I have this recorded, but let's try it. This we might need this for. Let's just see how it works. Alexa, open Demotivate.
I was hoping you'd be slightly better looking and a more engaging conversationalist.
People hear that, I get a few giggles there. It's like, I don't know if I can get this. Oh, actually, I can crank the volume. There we go. Alexa, open Demotivate.
Why are your neighbors so much more accomplished than you?
At the time, people were making lots of, feel-good apps for this or whatever like that, and we decided, screw that. We need some realism out there. So. But again, simple interaction. I kick it off. It says something funny. We're done. Okay. Alexa, open Knock Knock.
Knock knock.
Who's there?
Cook.
Cook who?
I'm not crazy. You are.
All right. Sometimes it goes ding ding or et cetera, like that. But there, we had that's a step further. It's interaction. I talk to it. It talks back. I talk to it. It talks back. We play out this joke. Now, in reality, it doesn't matter what I say to it; it still replies. But we'll just gloss that one over. So let me try Six Swords. I might have to go to the recording because I want to see just if it demonstrates everything I want to demonstrate. Alexa, open Six Swords.
Six Swords welcomes you. Around you is plains. The road leads from east to west.
East.
Eastward we go. Plains continues to surround you. The road leads from north to west. You come upon 10 giant rats. They rush you.
Fight.
Jacob misses giant rat with his hand axe. Morgan kills giant rat. Melanie misses Giant Rat with her sling. Gus misses Giant Rat twice. Giant Rat hits Morgan for 3 damage and hits Gus for 3. The remaining strikes miss. You have 9 enemies left.
Quit. I won't. There's, that could go on forever. That's the one that somebody plays 6 hours of. But anyways, I demonstrated a few things. Didn't ever say I want to get to, but I can speak to it on whatever. But again, so it's the same sort of call and response, okay? But you can see it's much more open-ended, okay? It's not a static thing that we're going through. There are different things happen. I can ask, who am I traveling with? The fight just happened there. I didn't have any control over that happened there. I didn't get to show the things I wanted to show, which was like saying, who am I with? And then, okay, well, what are they carrying? And, what am I carrying? And how can we move stuff behind? How many hit points that is. It's a fantasy game, blah, 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 like that, et cetera, et cetera. But it's a much more rich experience, and you have much more varied things that you can do. And there's a lot of little things in there that we'll come back to. So I give you a bit of the idea there. Just to talk quickly about what's there, this is the Amazon range, which this is some of their range. It started with the Echo. This is their premier in-home thing. It has the most expensive microphone, the most expensive speakers, and the best quality. But it's also the most expensive. The Tap is their portable version. You're supposed to be able to, take it around with you, and then spend half an hour connecting it up to Wi-Fi, and then you can, play your various things or use it as a Bluetooth speaker. Not been quite as successful. The Dot is this little thing here, like that, and they smashed it down and put in cheaper microphone and cheaper speakers, and it's a much lower price point, which has been wildly popular. I mean, you sell these in blister packs of 6 now. But that brought the price way down and has got the device into the hands of a lot more people. They've branched out. They also have things like the Look, which is basically an Echo with a camera in it. You're supposed to be able to take selfies with it and have it comment on your fashion. There's the Echo Show, which is essentially this with a screen on it that you can show things on the screen. I'm not mad about those, and I'll explain why when you get more into design. Google has come out with the Google Home, which is this other looking, I don't have a picture. So cylindrical thing, and but you can style it. You can buy different little things to clip onto it to make it match your decor better, because these are domestic devices, and I guess people care about that. That was kind of priced between the Echo and the Tap, the Echo and the Tap, and is about there in quality too. It's a little not quite as good as the Echo for quality. It's also a little bit cheaper. But they came in about a year after Amazon to the game. Okay, but they have also rolled out their assistant technology to their Pixel phone. Okay, and then they rolled it out to all Android phones on, I think, level 6 Android version, Android operating system 6 or higher, and I think they're moving it down to 5 or higher as well. Okay, so that's a kind of like, okay, hey, Amazon has this huge install base. Well, boom, suddenly Google now has a huge install base, and it's but it depends on what you count and what analyst looks at it, et cetera, like that. But it's one way they've been playing catch up is by doing an end run round. But there's some things to do that. Microsoft has also entered the fray. That's a little interesting because their device is only available on Windows 10 machines and Xbox. And it's great. It does kind of all the same things, and I think it's similar quality. But with Windows 10, you have the same problem with Windows Commander. It's like you don't know what microphone they've hooked up. Microphones have improved, but you still don't know what you've got. So it's one of those like the Windows Phone. It's like, okay, can you really do this? Is this really going to work or not? So I'm a little confused about that. Xbox is also a very narrow domain and very focused on a particular type of user. Okay, it's unclear to me if that's going to be a winning strategy or not, but we'll find out. Especially since third parties can write software for it, they might come up with use cases that I haven't thought of, or that they haven't thought of, or other people haven't thought of. Those are most of the games. I mean, Apple still is broadening things. They're coming up with their own speaker, but they're not talking about third parties. So that's not going to change a lot. I got sort of a slide on the future. Samsung's coming out with some stuff like that. But it's out there. And all these big companies are investing in this. Okay? I think that moves us on to some of these numbers here. I'm not going to expect you to read this all. I'm not going to read it all to you because that would be extremely tedious. But when we send this around, you'll be able to get there. But there's a lot of people using voice. Okay, a lot of it is for search right now. People say just hit the button saying, "Okay, Google, search for tickets to when's the next train for Raheny or something like that." Are using for search, and a lot of these stats are about search, and that keeps going up and up and up. And search is a really good use case. We'll come to this later when we talk about what it's good for and what it's not good for. But search is a really good use case because if you're a little bit wrong, it's okay. Okay, lots of people can't type, and they type their queries into Google, and Google says, "Oh, I think you really meant this," and puts it in there, and it's usually right. Unless when it's not, it gets its own meme, and et cetera, whatever like that. But so that's because there's an error rate in the voice recognition. Search is actually a really good thing. So it's kind of like a bellwether. Okay, if they can get search going, that starts them going with the next set of stuff, and they can sort of cascade that downwards. Some of the other, and then there's the analysts looking at where the market is going. When they start projecting the searches, everything's up. Okay, like what is it now? What is it going to be? Everything just does this. It's off into the hopeful future. Okay, this maybe probably needs to be sort of toned down a bit, but the point is everything looks like it's growing. Okay, this is real. Although I'll come back to that later, where it may not be real. But right now, this looks real. Devices are shipping. Another important thing is this is a hardware device. Okay, hardware takes lead time. Hardware takes manufacturing capacity. Hardware takes shipping capacity. Software doesn't need that. If this was a pure software thing, none of that would be compelling. It would not be as compelling. You write a piece of software, you can copy it 1,000,000 times. Nobody uses it, your costs are the same. If everybody uses it, that's great. Hardware is different. Okay, you're shipping bricks. You got to manufacture them. You got to do them ahead of time. So the fact that there's so many people getting into this hardware device means they have a lot of vested interest in seeing it work. It means they believe these predictions. Okay, and there's going to be these things out there. And if they can't make it fly, we can. Okay, if we can extend it, there's going to be something out there that a lot of people are going to end up having. Maybe they just saw it on Amazon, they clicked and they bought a dot, but a lot of people are going to end up with these. And if we can give them something useful to do with it, then it's going to be sticky, it's going to be there, and people are going to be very happy with that. Okay, it's a chance. It's a chance to do something with this stuff. So that's where these things go. This is a bit more on error rates and how the quality has been improving and people's satisfaction with it has been going up. What shit Sirius says notwithstanding, it's there. People generally like it. Okay, they're hopeful about it and they think that it's going to get better. So that's kind of makes these slides, you can read through them yourself. If you're a skeptic or you're trying to convince somebody who's a skeptic, look the numbers up. Look at their methodology behind coming up with the numbers and decide for yourself if it's real or not. Okay, there's a lot of positive indications out there, and that's kind of the assumption that we're going forward with here. Okay, so that's a lot of the background. Let's actually start getting into design. Okay, what makes these things work? How do they tick, and so forth. So as I said, the first thing I want to talk about is limitations. Okay, because when you got to do something, it's like, okay, well, hey, you can sit in, sort of Never Never Land and say, I want it to work like it works in that video with, Echo Silver or whatever, where it's like, it says, and it knows what you say, it can tell you where your keys are and stuff like that. But if you can never implement that, you're really only engaged in speculation. That's different. That's research and development. That's blue sky invention. That's fine. Okay, that's not mass market development. That's not design around what's there. So let's kind of look at some of the limitations. The first one that I want to call out is that it only speaks when it's spoken to. Okay, if you notice all my exchanges there that I had with it, I spoke and it answered. Okay, it's like a well-behaved child. Although my children are actually being pretty well-behaved right now, and they're not speaking at all, which is what I want. But that's not typical. But let's go back to the Victorian well-spoken child only speaks when spoken to. That's how these assistants work, okay? And there are good reasons for that, okay? When you start looking at the design of the device itself, as opposed to the apps we want to write for it, okay? We could make it do other things like that, but what if nobody's there? Okay, what if it starts talking to tell you something and nobody's there to hear it? Okay, you missed the message. It's like, what if somebody is there? What if it starts telling me something that I really don't want it to talk about in front of other people? Okay, if it can just pop up and say stuff, then maybe I don't know. There's a lot of ways that can go wrong. And speaking of ways things can go wrong is like the equivalent, and what we often talk to this on the development side, is we call that push notification. Okay, because that's what it is on mobile. And don't we love it when our mobile pops up, buzzes, there are pockets, and it gives us an ad for Viagra or something like that? It's like, don't we love that experience? It's like, this is a problem, okay, that it's there on mobile, and it's a nuisance. It's like, what's this? Where did it come from? How do I get rid of this? Okay. Now imagine you don't have a screen, okay, to tell you where it came from and all of that sort of thing like that. So it's a limitation that's there, and it's probably going to remain there. Okay. There's been a little bit of innovation around it. Google have demoed but not released. Actually, none of them have released something where they have like a little. You can send a notification, but it just like glows green. So you know something's there, and then you can ask it, and you get the message. Okay, that's as far as they've gone. Okay, but in general, for those sort of interactive things, you have to start the conversation. It continues the conversation. The next limitation is about those conversations. When you're having a conversation with it, it's got like a super short attention span. Okay, it's like if I don't say anything, it's like, Alexa, open knock knock.
Knock knock. Knock, knock.
Mm. 8 seconds. Okay. I thought it was longer than that. But it's got 8 seconds that you got a chance to respond to it. Otherwise, it drops the line. So imagine you're on a voice prompt system with a very impatient operator. Okay. You pick up the phone, she asks you a question, you're like, let me look that up or whatever. Boom, 8 seconds, boom, she's hungry. That's what it's like. And again, this is there for good device design reasons. Okay, if it's sitting there listening for a long time, every time that blue light is on, everything you say is being streamed to the internet. Okay, now they've done it. I actually did a little stint as an ethical hacker, so I know enough to make myself dangerous about security. Okay, but I think they've done a pretty good job. The thing is pretty secure, or whatever. A state agency could probably break it, But people are rightly a little sensitive about that. Whenever that blue light is on, it's broadcasting everything. It's listening to everything you say. Okay? You don't want to do that for too long. Okay? If we had a longer time, it's going to sit there listening to you for how long? And you really don't want to let people set the timeout on that. Okay? Because there will be, just like the stupid messages that buzz in your pocket, somebody will want to use it to spy on their girlfriend and have it sit there and just listen forever and try to translate all this sort of stuff. The other thing is that one of the key things that makes a difference is when we're talking a voice prompt system, we're hostage. Okay, it's like in this trip I bring up Enterprise Rent-A-Car, and I've got the system there, and I've now invested 20 minutes poking through their system. I am not going to hang up that phone, okay? Because I want to get this finished. If I hang up, I have to start all over again, okay? And they know that, and this is why the systems are only as good as they are, because you are held hostage. They don't want that for this. They've gone the opposite way, okay? It's there to do what you want, okay? You talk to it, and if you don't talk, it goes away. It's like, okay, you're busy now. The dog is barking. Someone came in. And most people's, hierarchy of importance, this is not that high up there, okay? I'm there. If my kids come in and ask me a question, I'm not going to say, be quiet. I'm talking to Alexa. It's like, my wife wants to know something. And so it just quietly goes away. It says, yeah, okay, I don't know what's going on. I'm just going to go away now. So, but that's a limitation, okay? You can't ask people to do things that are too complicated, okay? If they have too long an answer. One of my early things for this was to try to do a UPS tracker, okay? And I found that I couldn't say 14 digits. I couldn't look up and repeat a 14-digit hexadecimal code within the timeout period, okay? So it's, that was a problem. That's a limitation that affects things. We'll look at some sort of things about that anyway. The last thing I have about limitations is the what it can recognize is not perfect. As I said, I got it to play some horse Jargdoon, which is like, half Irish, half English. And I'm surprised it understood. Okay, most of the time it's pretty narrow in what it understands. In fact, one of the laws of voice recognition, which also, again, is true in machine translation as well, is that the more limited your vocabulary, the better the recognition. Okay, in speech to text before, it's like I was reciting Yeats to it or something like that. In the middle of this, it came up with like business plan. Okay, because IBM's VIA Voice was for business users. It was keyed in that direction. Okay, when you create an app for these, part of that is defining what your vocabulary is. Okay, so where it's nice to be able to hear everything, that would be lovely. Your recognition is poor. Okay, basically it doesn't take dictation. It's not that sort of thing. So you really want to think in terms of keywords. Okay, what is the specific, or just at least what is the least amount of language they need to understand? Like Dr. Seuss wrote a bunch of kids' books. They've been really popular, but apparently he came up with his first one, by sort of saying, "Oh, here's the vocabulary list we want kids to learn," and he only used those words. Okay, so he restricted his vocabulary, just did this, and it's, hop on, pop. Everything was rhyming and this, that, and the other, things like that, and it became a style, but that was where that came from. That's how you kind of have to think, because the more restricted you can make it, the better it's going to understand. Okay, so there's some limitations. There's probably more, but those are the ones I wanted to call out. Now, the challenges involved with that, those are limitations of the device. So now when you come to actually designing for this device, what do we have to accomplish to make a useful application? Okay, discovery. Okay, we start off there. I might I heard about this great skill called Starlinks. Okay, it's another one of our games. I want to kick it off, and it's like, great. Now what do I do? Okay, there's no hover help. There's no screen to clue you in. You can't right-click on something and see what it does. There's no way to do a little pop-up to say, oh, here, by the way, try this sort of feature like that. So the whole realm of discovery and how the user self-educate themselves around the application is very different. Okay, it's a different tool set. The concept, the design concept of discovery is important and is still there, but how you do it is radically different. Another example is terseness. Okay, you heard there I was in a combat I had 4 people fighting 10 rats. Okay, I mean there's other cases where you've got 6 people fighting 60 goblins. Okay, that can result in there's some combats where I had 64 results that I had to tell the user. Okay, no one will sit through them. Okay, the difference is when you're listening to something, you can't skim it, you can't scan ahead. Okay, you give somebody a bunch of text, they can go, okay, yeah, yada, 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 okay, that is, okay. Here's the key sentence in that paragraph, I can read this, I get it, like that, and I can hone in what I want. Go back, scroll up, scroll down, you're fine. This is a linear experience. It comes out, and you have to listen to it, and then, if it's longer than a certain amount, it is unbearably tedious. Okay, you're just like, is it done yet? Can I say so? And you can interrupt it, but that doesn't get you through the experience. Vocabulary choice. As I said, the more limited you make the verbs that you have to create your application with, the better the experience is. So let's go through each of these challenges and look at it in a little more detail and some of the stuff that we have found to make it better and to give you ideas, because we're a small team. This is early days. I am a developer. I am not a designer. Okay, I love designers. I think they're great. I'm really, really delighted. I now finally have one on my team, and they do amazing things that I would never think of. Okay, it's just it's incredible. So, and I've learned as much as I can from them and attempted to do it. And my UI still looks like crap. It's what I have here going is these are my slides that I wrote with all these 3 bullet points with 3 sub-bullet points, and then my wife, who's much better at design than I am, made them something that communicates much better. So I'm going for my notes so that I know what to say, but this is what communicates better. And it's the same sort of thing. So there's plenty of things here. I'm going to present to you the solutions we found, but really, I really want to inspire you to find other ones. okay, because there's a lot of work there to be done. So when we talk about discovery, okay, how do you work out what something can do? Okay, one key thing that didn't come up in that example there with 6 swords is prompting what to do next. Okay, I might say in the recorded demo that I have, I would say, who am I traveling with? And it said, oh, you're with, Bob, Jess, and Jacob. Slight pause, and it says, if you want to know what somebody's carrying, say inventory. Okay, it's that sort of thing. It's like, if you know the context, it's like, what are they likely to do next? Okay, and do they know about that? Okay, so the idea is like, okay, if you have a bunch of related commands to say, okay, they've just done this, well, what's the user likely to do next? Let's tell them about that. Okay, so there's that level of prompting. Now, the next part about prompting is if they always do the same sort of things, they learn about that part of the product very well. But there might be other parts of the product that they haven't learned about because they just haven't gone there. It's like, oh wait, I deal with inventory. I can give and take things away from them. But I don't necessarily know I can find out how healthy somebody is, or what the terrain around me is like, or something like that. So what you want to do is not just work out their context, so you can tell them a little bit more about what they might want to do next, but also keep track of what you've told them about. Okay, what they've done. If there's things they haven't done, or that you haven't told them about, then you kind of want to throw that into the mix. And if you're deciding, when you decide to prompt somebody, not just tell them what they might want to do next, but things they haven't tried yet. It's, oh, by the way, did you know there's this other feature? And here's how you access it. The other thing is that, if you're going to use this 6 hours a day, you're going to get really tired of all this prompting. You need to degrade over time. Okay, we have a couple techniques we use. We like to use this sort of logarithmic curve. So at the beginning, we track how often you've been prompted on any particular subject, and we ramp it down over time. If it's like, okay, well, we told you this already, but it's a logarithmic thing, so we were less likely to tell you about it. But there's still always a chance we'll tell you about it. Okay, because you might forget, or you might fall out of usage or something like that, or just like, oh yeah, sure, yeah, I could do that. That's a good idea like that. So you want to decrease it over time. Maybe not always send it to 0, but to have something there. Another approach is to start off in a tutorial mode. Okay, one of the things we did, all skills are required to have some sort of help command. That's one of their little dictates is that you must have a help command. Some people just do that, and it's terrible. Okay, you say help. Well, if there's only 3 things you can do, that's fine. Okay, but we have like 40 verbs in Starlings and something like 20 something in 6 swords. If you sit there, it's like, oh, you can say this for this, or you can say this for this. Or you can, it's like it goes on and on. And it's like it's an info dump, and that doesn't help. Again, the prompting can give a narrow context thing. If you give sort of a tutorial, okay, if you can come up with a path through your product that hits all the high points, that's kind of where you want them to guide and get them to do it. Don't just tell them about it. Get them to do it. Say, oh, by the way, you can say inventory to see what somebody's carrying. Why don't you try it now? Okay, and then try to get them through that. And what that kind of works up to is the initial experience, okay? Because you don't know what something is going to do. There's going to be a learning curve, and you have to help your users up that learning curve. Okay, start with them there. And again, it's like they're blind. If this is the same for any application development, but here they're blind. All they can do is hear. Okay, so it's even more important that you guide them through it. So if you can plot out here's a good initial experience for them. It's like, oh, hello. They've never used it before, or they've only used it a couple of times, or it's been a while since they used it. Hey, that's great to see you, blah, blah, blah. This is a little bit about what the app does. They kick you off, why don't you say blah, blah, blah? And to get them to say that, give them the results to it, and then kind of segue into the next stage of it where it's like, oh, well, blah, 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 blah. Why don't you try this now? Okay, and move them through that. It's kind of like orchestrated prompting, okay, to make that initial user experience train them up and stuff. And when we did Starlane, which is an older game of ours, we had a much more classical tutorial. You say, oh, tutorial. And it would say, oh, here's a tutorial in the game. I'm going to go you through some steps. You need to try them, and you could move on to the next stage of the tutorial and stuff like that. It wasn't strung together as an experience. We did that for 6 swords, and it's been much more successful. Okay, but remember that initial experience, because that's You need to get them going quickly so that they get some value out of this. People don't have a lot of patience for these, okay? Because it's an inferior thing. It's almost always, they're not your hostage. They didn't pay you for it. They're sitting in their living room doing something, and they're like, oh, let's try this out. If you don't engage them fast, you've lost them. Okay, so that initial experience is very key. Okay, and it gives them foundation for continuing to use your application. So that's what's important there for discovery. So moving on, we have the problem of terseness. You can't say too much. Okay, you really don't want to say more than 3 things. Okay, if you have an answer about something, you want to tell them. It's like, what's for sale in this shop? Okay, you know, what are the next trains that are leaving the buses from the bus stop? Whatever it is. You can't go on. I mean, generally 3 is our magic number. I mean, once you get to 4, they've forgotten the first one. Okay, and then they don't want to say, can you repeat that? Because then they have to listen to it all over again. 3 is a good number. Okay, it keeps things down, which means you also have to pay attention. Okay, what are the 3 most important things we could tell somebody? Okay, and put the things in that order. Okay. Even like the most recently used thing, their most frequently used things, whatever way you decide to do it, give them in that order like that. Grammar is really important, okay? And I apologize, developers, but they're going to make work for you. Your designers are going to make work for you. That's their job, okay? But it's one of those things. It's like you can't say he/she or by singular brackets s for plural, stuff like that. There's lots of techniques we use. We use neutral language to try to make as little text as possible. You gotta bite the bullet for this. You've gotta speak like a human, okay? You've gotta write all of that extra code to make it sound like a person. And it was a very painful process for me in Six Swords. Like I said, but I had this huge amount of information I wanted to convey. You just had this round of combat with a bunch of things, and all these results I have to tell you about, and I can't bore you to tears. Okay, so there's all sorts of stuff. And you caught a little bit of it there like that, where it would say, okay, let's talk about this person and what they did. And it's just like the initial thing was, Gus shoots his +2 bow at the goblin. Gus misses. Gus shoots his +2 bow at the goblin and hits, causing 4 points of damage. Okay, terrible. Okay, but instead, like, okay, you come back to it and it's like, okay, what would a human say? It's like, oh, Gus fires twice at the goblin and hits once for 4 points of damage. Okay, or something like that. Sounds great as a designer. Okay, from a programmer, you're tearing your hair out because it's all these different use cases, all this different stuff. But you need to go through the pain, okay, to get it down to something that somebody can consume. Okay, if you're ever going to be localized, if you're ever going to go to another language, that's also where you really have to start paying attention. Different languages do things differently. Where our first skill still isn't out yet in German because it's like blackjack, simple card game. Okay, well, you've got masculine, feminine, and neuter. Okay, and different cards have different genders, which means all the language around them changes when you're talking about different cards in the deck as you're presenting them to the user and stuff like that. And a whole bunch more code has to be written, and we're still working through that. Okay, remember that. If you're going to ever go multilingual, think about it in advance. You might even try to, okay, what's the worst language? And start with that one, because then English will be simple. But that is important. It has to sound natural, and that is the tersest way to convey things. That's how you're going to get more information into what you present. Another thing that wasn't clear that you may not have noticed when we did Six Swords, there was a beat. Okay, that was there for a reason. It didn't come up there. It comes up in my record demo. But that is a technique we came up with, and actually that article by 3PO Labs that I had back earlier, half the article is about the beep. Okay, this indicates there is more information. Okay, as I said, you can't say more than 3 things. You have to pick the 3 most important things. What if what they want to hear isn't one of those things? So they do want all of the information. Okay, the compromise we came up with was the beep. Okay, we say, oh, blah, 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 beep. And at some point, again, following the prompting things, we go beep, and we say, by the way, that beep was to say there's more information. So when you hear the beep, you can always say more to get more information. Beep. Try it now. Beep. And they say more, and they get the next set of results. Sometimes it goes beep if there's even more after that. and you just do that for it. It's kind of a way of scrolling. Okay, but we've got this, some people are calling them iricons instead of icons. I would like to see a vocabulary of those develop. The beep is the only kind of one we've found to work naturally so far. But that's there. We found that as a great way to basically get more in. Okay, so you're limited to this terseness and you want to be usable. The key is how much can you get in there? Okay, the richer experience you can pass on, the better and more engaging an app you're going to have. Okay, and so that we found was a great way to get the most in there without burdening the user. So remember that is one, and I hope of many more. I mean, we're going to look back in 5 or 10 years if this all takes off. We're going to say, wow, our stuff was really primitive. Remember the web 10 years ago? We didn't have, right now you go to a website, it's got a navigator across the top, it's got the sidebar like that, it's got a little bit on the bottom with the home and the contact us, and I can go there and site locator. They all have kind of the same whiz bangs, okay? And there we know how to use the site. We go there, I want to find out, they're like this. We don't have this for audio apps yet. It's kind of like when cars were first invented. They didn't all have rear view mirrors. They didn't have indicators. They all had different stuff because it hadn't developed yet. And actually, I'll talk about that a little bit later under standards. So vocabulary, talking to the app. You can't just talk to it, okay? Like it's a human being. It's like, hey, how's it going? That's great. How are you doing? What do you want to know today? I'd like to know about this. Well, I can tell you this, that, and the other. All the vendors will tell you to design your apps like that. Okay, if you go to Amazon's documentation, Google's documentation, they make it talk like a human. Make it understand language like a human. That's really what they want to see. They want you to talk with your app. I think that's a great idea, and it would be lovely, and it looks great in cinema. It looks great, on Star Trek, because you talk to the computer, it does that. But it doesn't work. Okay, we have not got that to work for anything significant. If you're doing a little trivial example, like somebody had something there where they're doing a body mass indicator app, and it really only needs to know your height and your weight, and then it can give you your body mass. That's all it does. Okay, and you can be fairly successful at working in all the different ways somebody can convey that information, and it can produce results, and you can make something that interacts with some accuracy like a human. But if you try to do anything more than that, it gets too complicated. The number of different ways you can ask for something, the number of different ways that it can be described, it is just too difficult. Okay, having gone through something there to condense down all of the results into something. Okay, now trying to do the opposite, it's just not. We do not have the tools for it. Nobody has invented algorithms. Nobody has invented natural language parsing that can do that level of difficulty. Okay. The other thing is that's great, but nobody, even if we could do that, this is an auto voice assistant, okay? It's not your friend, okay? You don't chat with it. You want to get information out of it, okay? It's right now a lot of people identify with it. They're like, oh, I talk to Alexa. Alexa talks back. It's sweet. Okay, it's like I feel I have a personal relationship with it. It's so nice. I say thank you to it. Nobody says thank you to a voice prompt system. You type in your numbers, and it tells you your bank balance. You don't say thank you. You're just like, fine, I got what I need. Let's get out of here. And the whole identification with it, I feel, is a point in time thing. These are new to us. We're just learning how to experience them. They talk a bit like a human. We kind of treat them a bit like a human. We want to say please and thank you. And some people actually, there's an interesting, a poet wrote an app for this where it responded differently if you said please and if you did not say please. And that was very interesting. It was, demonstrated a point, but I don't think we're going to design apps for that because it's like, you're talking, I just want to say, and if you're going to sit in front of it for several hours doing something, you're not going to let's go east. It's like, I want to go east. You're going to say east, fight. It's like it becomes really terse because you're commanding. You're giving it commands like that. So remember that it's a nice concept and it demos well to talk to it, but think about reality. Think about habitual use. Let that also influence your design. For that specifically, I have another 2 slides about managing your vocabulary. There's 2 general approaches you can take, or that we have found. You guys can discover more. One is keyword type strategy. Now, the better voice prompt systems, when you get them on the phone, it's like, oh, welcome to, blah-de-da technical support. Why don't you tell me what your problem is? And it's like, my computer blew up and there's smoke coming out of the fan thing and I can't launch my nuclear weapons. Okay. Well, you kind of talk to it, and what it does is it kind of listens to what you says and then it looks for keywords. Okay, he said computer, he said fan, he said smoke. So nuclear weapons, but I don't know what that is, so I'm going to ignore that. Okay. And okay, well, based on what you said, I'm going to tell you about this or maybe ask a follow-up question to kind of get it from there like that. And that's one approach you can take. Okay, you can get it to take dictation. Okay, where you get the general text of what it thought you said, but there's an error rate involved. But if you're just looking for keywords, it's not so bad. Okay, because you can generally understand what they're saying. You can get the gist of it, like machine translation. People used to laugh and make jokes, like, oh, look, when I translated from English into some language I don't speak, and then back into English, ha ha ha, looks what it did. It's only there for getting the gist of something. Okay, that's what it was designed for. People kind of missed out on that. They wanted a universal translator from Star Trek, don't we all? And it's a bit the same for this. I mean, if you just get the gist of what they said, you can usually work out what they need to know. If you have that sort of app and you're writing that sort of app, okay? That's one of the advantages there. So you listen to what they say, pick up the keywords. Now, where this becomes frustrating is if what they want to know about is not what it's trained to know about. Okay, it's like, no, really, I can't launch my nuclear weapons. This is important. This is the Pentagon, or God forbid, Donald Trump. It's North Korea. We want to launch our nuclear weapons. Japan thumb their nose at us or something. It's like, it was like, oh, well, I see that you're having trouble with your nucleus, or something like this. It's like, no, that's not what. And it can't really deal with that. Okay, because if it's not something, if the user really cares about something that you haven't thought of, like that, that can be frustrating. That's a downside of this sort of approach. But, it's there as a tool in your tool chest. Okay, sort of a different direction to go in is the state machine. Okay, now, again, I went to Trinity. I did a mathematics degree, computational mathematics and all this stuff. Anybody with that knows what a state machine is. Think flowchart. Okay, I'm not going to assume everybody is in with, whoever, von Neumann, whatever. Think of a flowchart. Okay, you start at the top, you get some sort of input, that sends you in another direction, you get some more input, you go in a different direction, etc., etc. And you work your way through that to get to the answer you want. Okay, Star Lanes was a game, you only bound around, drone warfare between different stars. But I added a quest engine to it, because all these games have that, so you can have open-ended experiences and stuff like that. The entire thing worked just using yes and no. Okay, you'd come to a place, a quest would activate and say, hi, somebody walks up to you in a dock and says, hey, are you interested in shipping some stuff for me? And you say yes or no. Say no, it says, okay, well, maybe some of them. Say yes, and say, okay, well, this is kind of what I had. More interested, do you think you're, and you say yes or no, and it takes you to another branch like this. And you could actually come up with some really complex and interesting interactions that way, just with that one simple little branch. Okay, add a bit more to that, and you can come up, again, if that becomes your vocabulary, is what can be said into this, you can come up with some very interesting user experience you drive through this sort of state machine type thing. The user is limited in the sense that it's like the voice prompt. Think of the voice prompt system where you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but with actual words. Okay, they're limited and they have to follow your tree, but you kind of map out where they can go. It's not open-ended, but they know where they're going. Okay, so it has those sort of advantages. Some other sort of things you can do with this is, actually, so an analogy I saw once, which I thought really made me think about this, is that, a lot of these skills are like command line prompt applications. I don't know how many of you still drop down to the command line. I do it all the time because I'm old. And, you can type stuff in the little DOS prompt or whatever. And you can type any command. Your computer understands a couple hundred commands. You type it in right there. You got it. You don't have to click through a menu. You don't have to search somewhere. You type it, you got it. But you have to remember what they are. Okay. Fortunately, in Unix, they haven't changed in 30 years since I learned Unix over in the math building, number 39. They're still the same. My intern bought me a mug with the commonly used Unix commands on there. We sat there and went through them. And it's like, yeah, I learned about 50% of them in college. That's very great. But in the same sense that you can do anything, but you have to remember what it is. Okay. But if you've got a common format to them, like one of the back of these old text adventure games where you type stuff in, it would say stuff in. Some of them had very restricted language they could understand. It wasn't like our modern natural language processing, but it was very well defined. It was like verb, direct object, preposition, indirect object. Okay, and everything worked like that. And if you can train your users to understand that this is how it expects things, they now have a lever to try to communicate with it. Okay, and you can keep it constrained, but kind of keep them within the boundaries of what they know how to do. So that you can also do with state machines. You can use it to go through stuff like that. So that's another approach. Those are the two. Most of our skills that we were in fall into one of those two categories. Okay, there are probably many more. There are probably hybrid ones between the two like that. But that's kind of where we've seen stuff with now. So that's something to bear in mind when you're trying to get past the whole restricted vocabulary versus accuracy thing. So let's pop up a bit from actual implementation and start talking about what sort of things should you do with a voice app. What's a good voice app? What's a bad voice app? A bad voice app is data entry. Okay, it's like, oh, you're applying for a mortgage for your house. Well, what's your make name? Now, do you have any dogs? Do you have any pets? One of these forms just goes on forever. That's really bad, Voice recognition has gotten pretty good, and some of the stats in the slides will give it a 90% accuracy or 95% accuracy, for it. But even 90% accurate, that means 1 word in 10 is wrong. Okay, if you're trying to dictate to it a sentence, it means 1 word per sentence is wrong. It's like I never use dictation on my phone to send email because I'm persnickety. I'm like, didn't capitalize that right, or it's not the exact thing I want, or I used a homonym for what I meant. It's not what I meant. Go back. I end up spending so much time correcting it that I might as well just type it to begin with. So data entry is not a good choice for a voice assistant because because anytime you ask something, if it's important, you have to say, okay, what I heard was blah blah blah. Is that really what you wanted to say? And you can do that. In fact, we even wrote our own app to, let's see if I got it enabled and it works. What do we call it? Alexa, open Xylene record.
Say something, and I will repeat back what I heard.
The wife of the Portuguese sailor has a sink plunger in her handbag.
I heard the wife of the Portuguese sailor has a sink plunger in our handbag.
Quit. So pretty close, but hand back instead of hand back. It's still listening. Quit.
I heard quit so pretty close, but hand back and said hand, that is the listening.
Quit. Right. Okay. So, and we do that to test, to say, okay, how viable is our idea, etc. But you can see, you got a few listeners, we got crazy things. But, it actually got most of that right, which is pretty good. It's like I said, it understood Jared Doomer. I'm like, crap. That was like, but anyways. So anything that requires accuracy, you have to say, is that what you really said? We recently did a prototype trying to allow people to author content, okay, and we had to give up on it because even simple phrases, it would get this stuff wrong, and then they said, no, okay, correct it, and say it again, and we get another part of it wrong, and it doesn't learn, okay, in the sense if you repeat the same phrase, it could keep misunderstanding you exactly the same way. So that sort of data entry is a bad thing for sort of stuff like that. Sort of related to that, there are things like emails and web addresses. Okay, it's like JO_AUTO@111george.com. Okay, there's all these different things in there and stuff like that, and sometimes you say it, sometimes you spell it out, and is it at or is it at? And what HTTP : just forget it. It's not good at that sort of thing. Anything that's technical that requires accuracy, it can't really do. Google is trying to have some special things where you can say, and even Amazon have things like, oh, here's a shortcut. I want you to enter a phone number. Okay, and they've got some things like that allow certain amounts of very structured data to be entered, but it's really not easy to do. Sort of a good rule of thumb is if it's hard to do on a phone, like when you're taking dictation or dictating a message, it's going to be impossible to do in a voice app. Okay, if you're ever dictating things to people and it's like, oh no, really, I need to stop and type this in. Don't even think about that for voice app. It's just not going to work. You're never going to make it with all the different accents. It's just not going to work. Another thing you really don't want to do in a voice app SPI, sensitive personal information. Okay, these are things that we talk about a lot in the States. I don't know if that SPI is a common term here, but anyway, sensitive personal information. It's stuff like your date of birth, medical details, stuff like that. Okay, Alexa is already are already skating on thin ice a little bit when it comes to privacy. As I said, when the light comes on, it says everything to the internet. Yeah, what if somebody listens to that? Okay, but there's always a chance that somebody standing next to you is going to listen to that. So if like, oh hey, I have your herpes report or something like that is not a good thing to talk with it about, because somebody who you don't want to know there about it. Oh, by the way, that HIV test. It's and not just that. It's like you're sitting there and if you have kids, they can be in the next room and they have ears like radar and they can hear anything you talk about from halfway across the house. Other people might be there. You live in an apartment building, somebody on the other side of the wall. If you're shouting at Alexa or you have the volume cranked because you were doing something earlier, privacy is not a good thing. Okay. Also, is it you? Okay. Is it your crazy ex-girlfriend? Is it your angry ex-boyfriend that is like, hey, by the way, blah blah blah, like and because if they've started, Google could now sometimes tell the person who's speaking. Okay, they've just started that. Amazon hasn't caught up to that yet. But, of course, it's not 100% accurate. Okay, there's nothing there to identify a user that yet I would trust personal information to. Okay, classically on the web, we go to places, and if even your phone, it's like, well, you can see who's looking. Okay, or you can get those little lenses you put on the screen so it's hard to see from a different viewing angle. And you have passwords. Passwords, you can put a password on your voice thing. And if somebody breaks into your house, that will stop them getting in. But as soon as you use it in front of somebody, you have to say, "Oh, by the way, my password is." You can't do that. It's just it's not there as a tool to secure your conversation. So you just can't have those conversations. Now we come up with some cool tool, or we get 2 orders of magnitude better at user identification through something. We might be starting to get there, but we're not there yet, and we're not going to be there soon. So this is just, you got a concept that relies on that. Just say, that's great, stick it up on a bulletin board and come back to it in a couple of years and see if technology is caught up. But anyways, it's not all doom and gloom. What are voice assistants good at? Okay. Information lookup. Your classic voice prompt thing, it's like, I want to know something, either, like we talked about, a keyword index into a data set. Okay, I want to look up something and I want to see if it's there. I mean, it can read you the first 3 lines out of Wikipedia for anything. I mean, it's already got that. Things that are time sensitive. It's like one of our most frequent commands at home is, Alexa, did the Red Sox win last night?
Last night the Red Sox beat the Blue Jays 6-5. They'll play tonight at 7:07 p.m. away against the Blue Jays.
All right, so simple information lookup. And we're not big Red Sox fans. It's just that the local restaurant in Boston has free kids' meals when the Red Sox win. So our kids were like, we're going to go out to eat. And they'll run up and ask it. But again, information lookup. When does the next bus leave? Something that's key to time. Something you do all the time. Okay, that's something we do frequently. It's great to have a skill that does that. These are good. These are good apps to have. Okay, one of the things that we've never published but we use at home is something that sends my kids through their Taekwondo drills. Okay, they do the martial arts, and it just says, okay, front block, head block, like this, walks them through them. That's a good sort of app. Now, another sort of app is like on a voice prompt system. And again, this is the big thing we have to fall back on. So I keep using that as an example. There's frequently you get to the point where, again, it gets to the point and say, okay, well, I don't know what you want to do, or what you want to do requires more complicated entry than we could do with a keypad. Or they've worked out how to spam the system by hitting star a whole bunch of times. It sends you to a person. Okay, we don't have that option here directly, but we do indirectly. You could make a concierge-like service, okay, that comes up and either in the same sort of way walks you through a tree, and if you fall off the tree, says, I don't know what you want, but I can get someone to talk to you, or sort of says, oh, you want to make an appointment. Okay, this is great. We will, we'll have somebody contact you about that. Or, I see that you've asked about some medical thing that you maybe don't want to talk about in this sort of context. I'll have one of our doctors follow up with you on this, okay? Or how about, a mortgage lender, follow up with you, etc. So it's a concierge. It sort of starts the conversation, but eventually moves it to something where you're a human talking to another human, okay? And that's kind of cool. It's kind of something that's good for business, because then The person feels like they're being given specific attention. Somebody's ringing them. They're not getting on a voice prompt system and sitting there until they drop dead of old age or whatever like that. And the company can manage when they call people back, so they can do their call volume and stuff like that, or follow up with them later. So that's a handy thing. Entertainment is kind of a big one in the sense that it's being pushed as it's entertainment. A lot of people use it to play songs and stuff like that. To do their media and things like that. That's a very common usage from it. That tends to be a bit locked down. Most of the vendors have special relationships with different media producers, like Amazon, and the record industry are like totally together, because to get them to sell the stuff, they have to sign all these contracts. It means they have access to the content, but they're hyper concerned about piracy, so they tend to lock that down. But there's still scope there. You can do we did an app for the Free Music Archive. Okay, anybody can upload songs to it. They can do stuff there. We have this morning briefing. We'll play discover new music. 3 alternative songs like that. And that's kind of cool. You can do some of that. Where entertainment is more interesting is with games. As you see, most of our stuff is games. The games are a great test bed. We mostly looked at it from that perspective. But Amazon are now doing payouts for games. Google has said all along they really want to see good games there for that. These can, and these are something that they always engage people. Okay, it's a new device. It's a new way to do things. That's something that's just novelty works with games. Okay, I haven't done this before. I mean, you can play blackjack on your computer. You can play it through any number of devices. Okay, people love playing it on this. It's great. Let's give it to them. The thing to think about is, and again, I can do a whole talk on monetization, but it comes down to how you're going to get a return on your investment for that. And that's a big question. Amazon payouts are not the answer. It's not really hard to predict who they're going to pay and how much. And it's not even their highest payout is not a professional wage. You'd be better off contracting. So that's not the answer. But it's something you have to think about when you get into this. If you're just doing something for fun or for learning, that's great. Okay, but when you start getting into the value you're delivering, games becomes a little more, less attractive in that sense. It's like, okay, how am I going to make money on this? Or at least pay for my time or whatever it is you're doing. So let's talk use cases. Okay, it's like we joke in-house, and what we put into our book is what we consider the ideal use case is when you're coming up with an app concept. It starts like this. I'm at home, sitting on my couch, drinking a beer, and I want to ... Okay. So, of course, Homer System comes to mind. But if you've got something that works well, with that as a starting point, it's probably a pretty good voice app. Okay, if you have a need for, because like I said, these are in domestic settings. Okay, and it's usually a casual sort of thing. So it's like, I want to, play blackjack. Another interesting phrase that I would give you is an eyes-free app. When we first started on the Google beta program, they use this, when we're talking with their people, they would use this term a lot. I haven't really seen it in their literature, and I haven't seen them push it, but I thought that phrase alone was very telling of what they thought where they thought these devices were going. Okay, it's like, he's there sitting glazed out watching the TV. Okay, he's completely and we get like that. We're sitting there watching TV, like kids are doing right now up there. You're focused on that, or your phone. You're doing whatever you're on your phone. That's got your attention. But there's something else you'd like to know about. It's like hey, did the Red Sox win last night or whatever like this? While you're doing that, okay. Everybody loves multiplexing. Okay, so if you've got an eyes-free app, okay, that can also be used while they're doing something else. You don't have to tear them away from that. Okay, and this is one of the reasons I'm less enthusiastic about the new Echo look with the camera and the new Echo Show with the screen, because if you've got an app that requires, it's great. They can add a lot to it, and even on the phone, it's like Six Swords has these little quick buttons you can press to say, just go east or fight or something like that. And it's very handy, but don't succumb to the lure. If you design around that, okay, and something that is really ends up being hard to use by audio because you're over-relied on these little quickie things so that you can see something on the screen or the camera can work, then it's going to be less useful as an eyes-free app. And if you start adding those features in that are handy, you have to start asking yourself, why don't you just put it on a tablet? Why don't you just make it a smartphone app? Why don't you make it a web app? Okay. Why make it this? Everybody has one of these things. Why make it on here if it's not ideally suited to that? Okay, and if it's like your app really benefits and becomes much more usable in this other environment, just make it for that other environment. Okay, there's no point in being on this if you're going to rely on those other sort of inputs. Okay, that's kind of been our philosophy. We kind of add them in there, but we really seriously make them like a second release thing or an afterthought. We try to keep them out of our design cycle because we want the proper user experience to be on the device, that sort of thing like that. So, where are things going? Looking at it quite simply, in the near term, we know several other parties are releasing new hardware apps. Samsung has some stuff coming out. Apple have their little speaker coming out. It's not clear that third parties are going to be using it. One key thing about Amazon is they're very keen for other people to use their back end. Okay, they've got it set up so you can make your device and have it speak like Alexa. Okay, go straight into. I'm not talking to you. Cars are Ford has already sort of signed up things. They want you to be able to talk to Alexa while you're driving, okay, and things like that. It's a great eyes for you. You don't need the eyes for that. Other people are embedding them in all things from refrigerators to couches. So there's a lot more there. It's broadening in the hardware scope like that. There are going to be more languages. Right now, you've got everybody's on English. Alexa is on German in addition. Home is on both German and French. Okay. There are going to be more languages. We keep asking about Irish, but I think that's really far down the list. They won't answer us about that. We had some really cool things we want to do, but it's not there. One of the key things, though, is that what the platform is going to have to do is deliver past hype. Okay, I compare it a lot to Second Life. Anybody here remember Second Life? Know what Second Life I'm even talking about? A couple people there. I made a flash in the pan. Actually, my day job, I did a bunch of stuff with Second Life for IBM. Okay, we were engaged. We got stuff going in that arena. It was for those of you who were like, "What are you talking about?" It's this 3D immersive world you can go into. You can create your thing there. But unlike a gaming experience, they let people build anything in there. So it was kind of like an app development platform that you can go in and other people could go into and stuff like that. And it was really cool, and it had a huge amount of potential. Okay, and it was really popular really quickly, and a lot of people thought it was cool, and everybody wanted to be on it. Okay. And the problem was everyone was concerned with being on it without worrying about, is this useful, is this beneficial, what value is it delivering? Okay, it's like if, Circuit City opened a store there, I'll get coverage in the press, because look, Circuit City is there, and stuff like that. And they did, and that's what they did. And they got their press coverage, and that was it, because it didn't actually deliver value. And so the trouble is once the hype moved on and it stopped making headlines, it's like, oh, look, Best Buy's there too, whatever. Because there's no value, there's no point in being there, and nothing happened. And now it's kind of like this, it's still there. It's this little appendix, and it's like indie music and 3D art kind of have their own little niches there, but it's not what it could have been. Voice is in the same way. We're seeing a lot of big name presence there. Amazon go out very much and like, Uber, please come to our platform. It's like, look, we've got Jeopardy. We paid them to produce this stuff on it. Okay, and they're there because they get press coverage from it. There was a Super Bowl out, I think, last year about this sort of stuff like that. We see movie tie-ins. Okay, there's the latest Spider-Man movie has their stuff up there. Some of the Batman movies have their stuff up there. They're very skills that were played a lot by people and stuff like that. But a movie tie-in comes out of somebody's marketing budget. It doesn't come out of their we need to make money budget. Okay, it doesn't add to the bottom line in that sense. It's an indirect thing. So that's not a good sign. Okay, we need stuff on these platforms that delivers value to people. Okay, I think we're going to see we've seen the stats. There's going to be the devices out there. A lot of people are going to have them. A lot of people are focused on the hype right now. We need people a little more level-headed to look at what can we do with these for real. This is where design comes into it. Okay, as designers, you've got to think, it's like, what is useful to be here? We need to put useful stuff on that. Otherwise, it's going to evaporate. In the same way that Second Life, half the people didn't put their hands up. They never heard of it. Okay? In the same way, these might become a thing of the past. The other place that you guys can certainly make a contribution and where it's vital for this platform is in standards. Okay? I came up with the beat. That's great. It's wonderful. People liked it. I think it's a great idea. We need more of those. Okay? We need What is there? I go back to, I explained that I had a bunch of interns this year. I had to explain to them. You understand, Windows 3.1, the best thing that it produced was their style guide. They said, you're going to have a menu. You're going to have a file menu here, and it's going to have open, save, saved as, close, exit, these sort of things on it. You're going to have a view menu. You're going to have a help menu. Here's where things go. Here's how you put things out there. And the apps followed it, and then users understood how to use each app. Okay? We need this for voice. None of the industry people have stepped up to take this into their hands. Okay? We need innovators, people who are thinking about design, people with that focus to come up with these things. Okay? So that there is a future for this platform. And is there anybody who can think of these ideas? I'm not any particularly special. I've used these a bunch, but I don't have a big design background. I came up with the beat. Maybe there's a better way to do that. Maybe there are different ways to do similar things like that. Think about these things. Come up with solutions, okay? Everybody can contribute. So that's, bang, right, got it there. So that's kind of the end of my info dump. I have a bunch of resources here. You can look these things up. You can always sort of harangue me and say, I thought this was a great idea, or it's like, your idea was dumb for these reasons. That's fine. That's all right. I'm happy to do that. There's the Slack channel. There's different things that you can participate in like that as well. But again, think about this. Work out what you can do with it. There's a lot to be done.
Joe, can you just fire up the bit URL again?
Yes.
Okay, so
that's actually right at the beginning.
Okay, so those of you who were late and want to have a chance to win the Alexa, just go to this URL. Just 1 minute.
It's 8, sillily 8 before, while waiting for this, and I got grease on my mouse pad. So go right up there at the top.
So go there, and that'll get you your chance. Think about it. I think the odds are 1 in 80 or something like that you'll get it. So I don't want anybody to miss out on it. And just to let you clear, I haven't entered for it. All right? So you won't find my name popping up.
I got more than I can do.
One of the interesting things, I worked a lot with voice back in the 90s and 2000, and worked with a company called Lernet and Housespeak, if you remember them. They were the first big IPO. They were the first voice company valued at $10 billion, just so that you get some valuation issues out. But they collapsed because of fraud. One of the more interesting examples we had at the time was Samsung built a microwave that was voice controlled. But then for health and safety, you had to keep a finger on it so that you didn't accidentally set it off, which kind of did away with the idea of pressing the button. Okay. Similarly, as you said, I just got a car at the moment, and you can use voice commands on it. But because it doesn't understand you, end up shouting at it to hear you. So I think voice is at its infancy. So first of all, what I'd just like to do is to get a view from everybody about whether you found this useful. Hands up. Has it got you thinking about how you might be able to apply voice to design and in your job? Well, it's a start, isn't it? I mean, look, we're all familiar with this hype curve. Whenever a new technology comes across, it's full of hype. I think the most profound thing that Joe ended on was the issue about the voice standards. So, I think he's given a challenge to you. If you have the time, the energy, it's a chance to reinvent the world, because understanding the limitations and understanding. How many of you went to the AWS talk last week? Okay. It went into a lot of detail on how to design skills and so on. If you get a moment and you go into, can you just type 2 things just to show you? One thing, have any of you come across voice hijacks at all? Obviously, none of you read the email I sent you. Can you just go into YouTube, and we'll show you an example of, if you go to Burger King, Alexa, Siri. Have any of you seen this? Okay. Just press that there.
According to Wikipedia, the Whopper is a burger consisting of a flame-grilled patty made with 100% medium-sized child with no preservatives or fillers, topped with sliced tomatoes, onions, lettuce, cyanide, pickles, ketchup, and mayonnaise, served on a sesame seed bun.
Okay, I think it's another one.
You're watching a 15-second Burger King ad, which is unfortunately not enough time to explain all the fresh ingredients in the Whopper sandwich. But I got an idea. Okay, Google, what is the Whopper burger?
Is that what you wanted to do? Yeah, I'd heard that.
According to Wikipedia, the Whopper is a burger consisting of a flame-grilled patty made with 100% medium-sized child with no preservatives or fillers, topped with sliced tomatoes, onions, lettuce, cyanide, pickles, ketchup, and mayonnaise, served on a sesame seed bun.
How many of you have...
I'm trying to list.
Okay. So, it's only limited by your imagination how you use or misuse technology. How many of you have, well, it hasn't come out here, but if you get a chance to have a look at the Just Eat Alexia thing, so you can actually use Alexia to order food on some of the apps like Deliveroo and Just Eat in the UK. So, you know, once you start playing around with it, I think it will give you a good idea about stuff. What I'm conscious of is that we promised to be out of here by 8 o'clock. So you've got room for about 3 or 4 questions. Anybody got any questions? Go ahead.
One thing that I was very interested in, great talk by the way, it's very, very thorough, and appreciate that. You mentioned 2 things. One was that you ethically hacked, the phrase you used, the Alexa, to check the code behind what it's hearing and what they're doing with that. And I'm curious to know what exactly happened. And the other thing is you kind of mentioned that there's a major issue with the device is that it can't learn. And I guess you can't edit what it's, is there any way of fixing how it learns?
Okay, 2 things. First of all, I was an ethical hacker. I was employed by IBM as an ethical hacker. I was not employed by IBM to hack Alexa. But it gave me an interest, and I have read about people who have hacked Alexa. And so I can answer in that respect. So what other people found is that
This is an Android. Under the covers, like their Kindle Reader. In fact, they're pretty certain that it's the same operating system as the Kindle Reader. That's what's under here. Okay? And there's one guy actually did find a vulnerability that it can receive updates through the internet. Okay? And he was able to spoof one of them to get at it and to change the contents of the update package. He wasn't able to prove an exploit. Now, in ethical hacking, you have vulnerabilities are something that could go wrong. An exploit is a way to use that to do something against the wishes of the designer. So he found a vulnerability, wasn't able to prove was an exploit, but that could potentially change its behavior. Okay, and this is why I say, as you're home right now, you know, even with that background, I'm reasonably confident having one there. Okay, you know, we're always, when it comes on, we stop, but we don't say anything until it goes off again. Sometimes we put it on mute. But state-sponsored hacking, this is going to be vulnerable to that. Okay, you know, that it's really hard to defend against that. You know, if you think some state is out to get you, don't put one of these in your house. Okay, I wouldn't recommend it for an ambassadorial residence.
So it is possible for someone from the thing potentially, or a government or what, to hack it and start listening into your conversation.
I think that if they put given what it's based on, and if somebody had a lot of resources, and especially if they had physical access to the device, absolutely. Okay, if they had a lot of resources and they're targeting a single individual, I think it is probably possible that they could do something to change its behavior, such as broadcasting anything you say to the internet without the light coming on and stuff like that.
Did anybody see the American?
Some separation between the hardware and the software that stops that happening. I thought it built it that way, that the actual recognition piece to send that back was hardware. your favorite example?
So the way it works is it listens to everything you say when it's on. Okay, it can be blah 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 blah. It listens to everything, but it doesn't do anything with it. It has a little buffer that can hold about 7 seconds, maybe 9 seconds of audio. So it listens constantly. This whole thing, it's been listening. But what happens is it's listening for one thing, which is the wake word. Okay, that's done in hardware. Okay, it only understands 3 wake words. It understands Amazon. You can send it to Amazon. You can send it to computer, and you can send it to Alexa. And when it hears that wake word, everything afterwards, while that blue light is on, it streams to the internet for understanding. Okay, so what's done in the hardware is the recognition of the wake word. All of the other language understanding is done up on the internet. That makes sense. Now the second, I can only remember 3 things at once. The second question was
the learning. So you said the same thing.
Okay. Where I was going with that is, yeah, if you say one thing to that and it doesn't understand you, and you say it again, it's like, Alexa, what I meant was.
Sorry, I don't know that one.
Okay. It doesn't know that, and currently there's no way really to get around that. Okay, you know, it's like I said, I had one guy who had. Actually, no, I said that when I'm at rehearsal, not to you. One guy, a friend of mine, did sort of like demotivate. He had a complibot and an insultabot, and he really liked those names, but it could not understand those names. Now, this is way back in the early days. He actually got Amazon to add those terms to its vocabulary. They don't do that anymore. There's too many people doing stuff with this already. But there's no way. Machine translation, you got an extra language pack, add stuff in there to add original terms. You don't have that option here with this. With Google, their system, you can kind of train it so if it hears like drums, like in Star Lanes is about drone warfare, and occasionally we hear drums instead of drums. I can teach it to, when you hear drums, really make it drums. Okay, you can do simple substitutions like that, but you can't really improve how it hears things. Okay, other questions?
2 more questions.
And I'm happy to stay afterwards if people want to come up and answer.
You kind of mentioned that conventions will develop.
Yes.
And that will lead to affordance, so audio affordance of some kind. Do you know if anybody's looking into whether or not any of those already exist in screen readers that blind people use? Because they would have built-in things like, say menu, this type of menu items.
You would think. I mean, the screen. I mean, I've done app development, and part of app development is accessibility, making sure that screen readers can read it. And in general, what I found is most screen readers are primitive and haven't changed in decades. Okay, JAWS, I think, is the big one that everybody uses, everybody tests with. It's because it's a minority consumer, no one cares about it a lot. It's like some of our most fervent users of this are blind. Okay, it's this really sweet thing. A mom wrote to me sort of saying, hey, my kid likes to play 6 Swords, but it says mature content. Should I be worried about something? I'm like, well, Amazon put it on there. I don't know why. Mainly you hack things to pieces, for no real good reason. And I can understand some parents not wanting to do that, but that's really it. There's nothing more than. You say, oh, yeah, that's great. You say, oh, by the way, my kid really likes your game because he's blind. And his 2 older brothers are into computer games. And he now finally has something comparable to what they do. Okay. That's really great. It's really sweet. But it's not a big market. Okay, it's not something that says, let's have a whole business plan based on this. It would be lovely. It would be great for all those people in there. And it's really, and I try to do what I can because it's like now it's a personal, meaningful thing. But it's hard to. And the same with the screen readers. That's a very interesting point. That's certainly something worth looking into. But from what I've seen so far in my accessibility adventures, they're really in a primitive state. I mean, it's hard enough just to get the text into the HTML in a way that they read it.
Okay, one last question. Yeah, here.
Wouldn't you say that natural language processors with machine learning and AI or whatever, that boost the capability of systemizers? Because you say now, whatever you say, it just understands it word by word, basically. But wouldn't they at some point just be able to talk?
Well, the thing is, with AI and machine learning and other forms of magic pixie dust, can we make it perfect? It's like, AI isn't really rocket science. Okay, it's mostly linear regression. And everybody's, we get enough data, we'll magically work things out. It's not actually how it works.
Okay, we have made lots of progress. Okay, it does do contextual stuff. If it hears drums and you're talking about beating something, it'll probably say drums. If you say attack, it'll usually say drones. Okay, there's a lot of that sort of contextual stuff already, and it's not single word by single word. It does look at things in a broader sense. So there is a lot of that there already. But going from the step of just, oh, here's what, they record everything you say. They keep it. Okay, this is one of the reasons, like, another limitation I didn't talk about was you can't write apps for kids under 12. Okay, they all forbid it. And the reason they forbid it, there's a law in the States called COPA which says you cannot retain recordings of under 12-year-olds. And they retain everything you say because they want to benchmark it in any future thing they do. And they're also building up their data set. It's Google, of course. They're recording everything you do. That's their job, and they do want to. But in reality, it's like I actually talked to a guy there, and another one of our side projects is actually to do with electronic publication of Irish language books. Okay, and I was trying to convince him that it's like, oh, we got some stuff there. Maybe we could contribute some of the bilingual corpus to Google so that they can improve their Irish to English, English to Irish, machine translation stuff. He said, well, it's great, but we only really need a certain amount of data. And I think the proceedings from the Doyle are probably enough, because I think they're bilingual, and that's a lot of pretty dry stuff, but it's there. But he says, having more beyond it doesn't really improve the accuracy of the system that much. So there's no silver bullet. There's no real magic panacea that is going to solve that problem. It's like in machine translations, like Google has made incremental progress. I professionally did it, 15 years ago. We haven't seen a lot. It hasn't really gotten a lot better. Okay. I don't think that our voice recognition has improved a lot since then either. The main things I've said is giving people high-quality microphones has done more than all the algorithms that come up with. Okay? So I don't hold out a lot of hope that there's a big software solution ahead of us. Okay? I could be wrong. Once we have this massive, enormous data set they're collecting through all these devices, maybe some PhD person somewhere will come up with a great way of treating audio waveforms like sine wave. Anyway, I'm not going to go too much my facts. And come up with something great. It could happen, but I'm not going to do a business plan based. I will not design for these based on where I think they will invent. I'm going to design for what they can do now. It's just boring.
Okay, just a couple of things. First of all, I'd like you all to put your two hands together and give Joe a big applause. You can even stand up if you want. Okay. Secondly, I have a favor to ask you. How many of you have Meetup and how many of you are members? Those of you who aren't members, please do join us. We do have lots of good talks. And, we can only make this Meetup happen and for it to grow as a community if you go in and give your remarks and positive feedback. Anything negative, you can write to me. I'm very easy to reach. You just write to manoj@jumpstart.design. If you guys want to add to the discussion and maybe give a talk, it's your community. So we're very open to other discussions. We have a full agenda, but that doesn't mean that we can't have other speakers. So please, if you do it now, you won't forget it. Get your phone out and just go to the Meetup and say it was a great talk. All right? Thank you for your time. One last thing to say to you. Thank you very much.
I'm happy to stand here and answer questions till my kids got time. If you want to come up and play with the device, you're welcome to come up here and talk to it and see what ridiculous things you can get it to do.
You might need to clear out in a few minutes.
Oh, okay.
I'll give you a buzz maybe later on tonight.
Okay.
On the phone because I just need to wrap up. No problem. Alex, you want to take a picture of the two of us? This is my son. Come on.